Dear students, welcome to UGC E-Pathshala on Human Rights and Duties. My name is Professor Murthy. I am the Executive Director for the Center for Human Rights Studies, O.P. Jindal Global University. In the paper on civil and political rights, today we will take up the module relating to torture under international human rights law. We will examine it in the course of two modules, and as you are aware of, we have already done the domestic legal provisions on torture, and we have also seen the Supreme Court's jurisprudence on torture. Torture has been going on since ancient times in different forms. It affects the ability of a person to live to lead a life with dignity without any fear. It seeks to destroy the human spirit. It attacks the physical and emotional well-being of individuals, and in some cases the dignity and will of entire groups. Though human rights standards have evolved over past 70 years or so, prohibit torture under any circumstance, whether in peace times, whether in conflict times, yet it is systematically practiced in many countries of the world. It covers a number of methods which include severe beating, electric shock, sexual abuse and rape, prolonged solitary confinement, hard labor, near drowning, near suffocation, mutilation and hanging for prolonged period. It also encompasses being forced to stand spread-eagled against the wall for hours, being subjected to bright lights or blindfolding, being subjected to constant continuous loud noise, being deprived of sleep, food or drink, being subjected to forced constant standing or crouching or violent shaking. Moreover, torture is not limited to acts causing physical pain or injury. It includes acts that cause mental suffering, such as through threats against family or loved ones. International law instruments dealing with torture. In fact, if you look at international law, some argue that the state is also responsible for the torture carried out by private individuals or non-state actors in the form of racist attacks or domestic violence, if it does not do enough to prevent such abuses. The UN Convention on Torture is the most significant development in the area of international law with regard to torture. But before this convention was adopted, there were several international law instruments which prepared the ground for it. For instance, if you look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948, Article 5 of that declaration asserts, and I quote, "No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment," unquote. This prohibition against torture came into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a result of the horrors that the world had seen during the Second World War. The atrocities committed by the Nazis were too horrific, as it compelled the international community to ensure that such acts did not occur in the future. Now, Article 7 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights says, "No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. In particular, no one shall be subjected without his free consent to medical or scientific experimentation. And if you look at the Convention on Torture, which was adopted by the UN in 1984, you will find that, till 2017, this torture convention was adopted by over 162 countries. However, 7 countries, including United States of America and India, have signed but not yet ratified this convention. And Article 1 of the Torture Convention defines it as follows. For the purposes of this convention, torture means any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a third person information or a confession, punishing him for an act he or a third person has committed or is suspected of having committed, or intimidating or coercing him or a third person, or for any reason based on discrimination of any kind, when such pain or suffering is inflicted by or at the instigation of or with the consent or acquiescence of a public official or other person acting in an official capacity. It does not include pain or suffering arising only from lawful sanctions. This article is without prejudice to any international instrument or national legislation which does or contain provisions of a wider application. Now you can clearly see that the definition adopted by the Convention on Torture is very expansive and broad one. The Convention places an obligation on each and every signatory to implement effective measures to combat torture. And what are the obligations like? Article 2 of the Torture Convention lays down the obligations of the member states. It says every state party shall take effective legislative, administrative, judicial or other measures to prevent acts of torture in any territory under its jurisdiction. No exceptional circumstances whatsoever, whether a state of war or a threat of war, internal political instability or any other public emergency, may be invoked as a justification of torture. An order from a superior officer or a public authority may not be invoked as a justification of torture. Apart from the above mentioned obligations, the member states are also required to undertake a number of steps with regard to changes in the criminal law. And if you see Article 4 of the Torture Convention, it lays down further obligations. Each state party shall ensure that all acts of torture are offences under its criminal law. The same shall apply to an attempt to commit torture and to an act by any person which constitutes complicity or participation in torture. Each state party shall make these offences punishable by appropriate penalties which take into account their grave nature. And what are the steps open to a country when a case of torture is reported? Article 6 of the Torture Convention lays down a detailed procedure. States have to either try torturer by themselves or extradite that person to a country which has requested for that extradition. The highlight of the Torture Convention is that the Committee Against Torture, which has been set up to receive, study and comment on periodic reports from the state parties on the measures that they have taken to give effect to their undertakings under the convention, to initiate an investigation when there is reliable information which appears to contain well-founded indications that torture is being systematically practiced in the territory of a state party, and to receive and examine complaints by one state party of violations of the convention by another state party. Article 17 of the Torture Convention lays down the foundation of a committee which consists of 10 experts of high moral standing and recognized competence in the field of human rights who serve in that committee in their personal capacity. Article 19 of the Torture Convention refers to the powers of the committee and in particular consideration of periodic reports submitted by states on the steps taken by them. There is an optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture that was adopted by the UN General Assembly in the year 2002. This optional protocol aims to prevent torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment by establishing a system of regular visits to all places of detention. These visits will be carried out by an independent national preventive mechanisms which states parties undertake to establish or designate, and by a new international expert body, that is the Subcommittee for the Prevention of Torture. Now let us look at Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court that was adopted in the year 1998. Rome Statute which established the International Criminal Court to try perpetrators of such horrible crimes like genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes. It was adopted by the United Nations on 17 July 1998. And if you look at Article 7 of the Rome Statute, the systematic or widespread practice of torture and other inhumane acts of similar character, intentionally causing great suffering or serious injury to body or to mental or physical health, constitutes crimes against humanity. Torture is defined as the intentional infliction of severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, upon a person in the custody or under the control of the accused, except that torture shall not include pain or suffering arising only from, inherent in, or incidental to lawful sanction. Even if you look at the definition of genocide, which is given in Article 6 of the Rome Statute, or war crimes which are defined in Article 8 of the Rome Statute, they also contain torture as a constituent element, but the legal threshold is very, very high. In the case of genocide, torture, besides killing and other such acts, must be committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group. In the case of war crimes, torture or killing or other acts mentioned in Article 8 must be committed in particular as a part of a plan or policy or as a part of a large-scale commission of such crimes. In addition to these legally binding standards, a number of non-binding standards have been adopted by the international community on the issue of torture. Some of these non-binding standards contain explicit prohibitions of torture and ill treatment, other set out standards, safeguards and other measures contributing to prevention. Most of these instruments are in the form of resolutions adopted by the UN General Assembly or other UN bodies. Though they are not binding under international law, these soft law instruments should not be regarded as mere sets of recommendations which governments are free to follow or not as they choose. They have their persuasive power or a moral value, The adoption of these non-binding instruments has often involved a scrutiny as intense as that is applied to the drafting of treaties. Many of them have been adopted without a vote, a sign of strong agreement by states that the standards set out in them should be implemented. These soft law standards may subsequently be adopted as a legally binding obligation, as happened various provisions of the declarations against torture were incorporated in the Convention Against Torture. Some soft law standards may reflect actual or emergent rules of general international law. The standards may be used by national and international judicial bodies to elaborate the scope of established rules of law and to interpret and develop the rules set out in international human rights treaties. First, let us take up Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners 1955. The Standard Minimum Rules seek to set out what is generally accepted as being good principle and practice in the treatment of prisoners and the management of institutions. They apply to all categories of detainees, including sentenced prisoners, those under administrative detention, and persons detained without charge. On the whole, they represent the minimum conditions which are accepted as suitable by the United Nations. The rules lay down minimum standards for registration, separation, and classification of detainees, accommodation, sanitary installations, provision of food, drinking water, articles necessary for personal hygiene, clothing and bedding, religious practice, education, exercise and sport, medical services and treatment of mentally ill prisoners. They regulate disciplinary and complaint systems, the use of instruments of restraint and the transport of detainees. In particular, all cruel, inhuman or degrading punishments, including corporal punishment, are completely prohibited as punishments for disciplinary offences. There is also a section regulating the qualifications and behavioral of institutional personnel. Now let us take up Code of Conduct for Law Enforcement Officials 1979. This code contains guidelines for the use of force, including firearms, and the provision of medical treatment to persons in custody. The term law enforcement officials is widely interpreted as including all officers of the law who exercise police powers, especially powers of arrest and detention. The prohibition of torture in Article 5 of this code derives from the Declaration Against Torture. According to commentary to Article 5, the term cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment should be interpreted so as to extend the widest possible protection against abuses, whether physical or mental. The code authorizes law enforcement officials to use force only when strictly necessary and to the extent required for the performance of their duty. It may thus be used only for the prevention of crime or in effecting or assisting in the lawful arrest of offenders, and its use must be proportionate to the legitimate objective to be achieved. Firearms should be used only in the event of armed resistance or jeopardy to the lives of others, and only where less extreme measures are not sufficient to apprehend the suspect. Law enforcement officials should fully protect the health of persons in their custody and take immediate action to secure medical attention when required. Now let us take up body of principles for the protection of all persons under any form of detention or imprisonment of 1988. This body of principles specify the rights of persons under arrest and detention to, among other things, legal assistance, medical care, access to records of their detention, arrest, interrogation, and medical treatment. State should prohibit any act contrary to the principles, make such acts subject to appropriate sanctions, and conduct impartial investigations of complaints. Principle 6 states that no person under any form of detention or imprisonment shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. The term cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment should be interpreted so as to extend to the widest possible protection against abuses, whether physical or mental, including the holding of a detained or an imprisoned person in conditions which may deprive him temporarily or permanently of the use of any of his natural senses, such as sight or hearing, or of his awareness of place and the passing of time. Principle 21 states that no detained person may be subjected to violence, threats, or methods of interrogation which impair his or her decision-making capacity or judgment. No detainee may be subjected, even with his or her consent, to medical experimentation that may be detrimental to his or her health. Non-compliance with the principles in obtaining evidence should be taken into account while determining the admissibility of evidence against a detained person. Detained persons or their legal representatives have the right to lodge a complaint, especially regarding torture or other ill treatment, with the authorities responsible for the place of detention and, where necessary, to appropriate authorities vested with reviewing power. Such complaints should be promptly dealt with and replied to without undue delay. No complainant should suffer prejudice for lodging a complaint. Now let's take up basic principles on the use of force and firearms by law enforcement officials of 1990. These basic principles address the lawful use of force and firearms, the policing of unlawful assemblies and of persons in custody or detention, and reporting and review procedures concerning the use of force and firearms in the line of duty. Principle 7 states that arbitrary or abusive use of force and firearms by law enforcement officials should be punished as a criminal offense under domestic law. Principle 8 stipulates that exceptional circumstances such as internal political instability or any other public emergency may not be invoked to justify any departure from the principles. Force and firearms may be used only if other means remain ineffective or without any promise of achieving the intended result. Law enforcement officials should act in proportion to the seriousness of the offense and the legitimate object to be achieved. Damage and injury should be minimized. Medical assistance rendered to injured persons and relatives or close friends informed at the earliest possible moment. Now let us review the basic principle for the treatment of prisoners of 1990. They require that prisoners should be treated with respect for their inherent dignity as human beings. They should not suffer discrimination, and their religious beliefs and cultural precepts should be respected. They should have access to cultural and educational activities aimed at full development of the human personality to meaningful remunerated employment that will facilitate their reintegration into society and to all health services without discrimination. Efforts to establish solitary confinement are encouraged. Manual on the effective investigation and documentation of torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment, Istanbul Protocol of 1999. The manual and the principle it contains were produced by a coalition of experts representing 40 organizations or institutions in Resolution 55/89, to which the principles are annexed. The General Assembly strongly encouraged governments to reflect upon the principles as a tool, as a useful tool in efforts to combat torture. The Istanbul Protocol describes in detail the steps to be taken by states, investigators, and medical experts to ensure the prompt and impartial investigation and documentation of complaints and reports of torture. The investigation should be carried out by competent and impartial experts who are independent of the suspected perpetrators and the agency they serve. They should have access to all necessary information, budgetary resources, and technical facilities. They should have the authority to issue summons to alleged perpetrators and witnesses and to demand the production of evidence. The findings of the investigation should be made public. The alleged victims and their legal representatives should have access to any hearing and to all information relevant to the investigation. In conclusion, we have seen in this module the entire international law framework starting from UDHR, ICCPR, Torture Convention, Optional Protocol to the Torture Convention, Rome Statute, non-binding standards dealing with torture. And there are both these binding and non-binding international law instruments which deal with the prohibition of torture. The most significant development in this area has been the UN Convention Against Torture, which was adopted in 1984. This convention provides for an effective mechanism of ensuring that there is an end to the practice of torture. The idea behind this convention is based on the principles laid down in the foundational documents on human rights, both UDHR as well as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Thank you.